So, you just got your Miskatonic School for Girls. Maybe you got it in the mail from being a Kickstarter. Maybe you bought it at the store, I don't know. Maybe someone you liked gave you a present. That person probably wants to date you. Anyway, let's go through how to play this game because reading rules, not so much fun. Although there is a very nice rule sheet included in the box. All nice and colory, but whatever. All right, in the box, you're going to find a couple of things. You're going to find 4 of these paddles. These paddle playmats are used to keep track of your sanity. When your sanity goes to 0, you lose. Also gives you an easier time learning how to play. You're going to find some other things in here. You're going to find some glass beads to keep track of your sanity with. You're going to find, you might find some of these cards in here. These cards, if you notice, have no text and no picture. These are so that you can make your own cards if you want. You can write in whatever you want, make up your own rules, play the game you want to play. You're also going to find 4 very handy turn sequence cards, 1 for each player. These basically give you all the rules you need to know once you know how to play the game, keep everything straight. Lastly, you're going to find a bunch of cards. So let's take a look at setup, and I will show you how to set up your very first game of the Miskatonic School for Girls. So there's basically 5 types of cards in the game. The first type of card are the transfer students. Transfer students are all the same, and you're just going to find all your transfer students that came in the package, put them in a pile, and stick them between the 2 players. Very similar to the transfer students are the substitute teachers. This is another deck of nothing but substitute teachers. They're all the same. They get put together and also set to the middle of the table. Now next to the substitute teacher are your staff. These are the horrible Lovecraftian creatures who will be teaching your wonderful children about what they need to know. You can tell a staff card, they look like this. They have their own sort of card frame. They're pretty easy to pick out because they tend to look, well, pretty horrible. You want to shuffle those up, because these are all different. Shuffle those up, put a pile. I like to leave them next to the substitutes so you can remember that that's the faculty pile. The other type of card you have are your student cards. These are students that are going to join your house during the course of gameplay. You can tell the students that belong in the student deck because they have a cost down here in the heart, and they have this sort of yellow notepad space. They also have the round picture frame that all students have. And lastly, you have another kind of student, which looks very similar to the ones you just saw, except they don't have a cost, and their text box here has this sort of ripped out of a notebook sheet of paper. These are your starting students. They're the ones that you're going to start the game with. And specifically, you're going to want to start with, each player gets 3 copies of Natalie here, 2 copies of Alberta, 2 copies of Wanda, 2 copies of Roberta Blake, and lastly, 1 copy of your house leader. Now, all of this is in the rulebook, so you can always check anytime you want. But those 10 cards create your starting house, which is also your deck. You're going to take those 10 cards, you're going to shuffle them real good, then you're going to take one of the playmats, nice little paddles here, drop it down in front of you, take your starting house deck, and stick it on the playmat where it says deck. And as it says there to remind you, they go face down. Lastly, you grab one of the tokens for sanity, and you mark your sanity at 20, which means totally sane. You are full on ready to play. You've got your substitutes, your transfer students, your 2 decks set up, and your starting deck. And all you need is 1 more player, maybe 2 more players, maybe 3 more players, and you're ready to go. And that's all you need to set up the Miskatonic School for Girls. All right, so it's the first turn of the game, and I look down at my handy turn summary chart, and it says that the first thing I do is I draw from my purchase pile. I don't have anything there. And then my deck until I have 5 cards in my hand. All right. The next thing I do is I stock the store. The school store is the middle of the table, and this is where cards are going to appear that we can purchase. There are 3 spots, so I flip over 3 cards into the store. There are never more than 3 spots, and you always fill up the store shelves to 3 when it's your turn. Okay, now I get to pay tuition and go shopping. If you look at the cards in my hand, up here in the top, the number in the red heart is friendship points. And the number in the green squid, well, that's nightmare points. You use the friendship points to buy yourself more students, and you use the nightmare points to buy faculty for your opponent. You don't buy your own faculty, you buy them for your opponent. Now, each of these cards produces only one type. This one produces either. It doesn't produce one of each. You have to pick whether you want 1 friendship point or 1 nightmare point. So I look at my hand, and then I look down at the school store. Down at the school store, we have the cost listed of each of the cards out here. So the first thing I do is I buy a student. Now I have 3 students out there I could buy. 2 of them cost 6 friendship points and 1 costs 4. So I'm going to go ahead and use these 3 cards, which produce 1, 2, 3, 4 friendship points. So I'm going to spend those 3 cards, and I'm going to take Bobby here, and I'm going to put Bobby into my purchase pile. Now, if you played a lot of other deck builders, you might want to put Bobby into your discard pile. This is one of the differences in this game, is it goes into a special pile called your purchase pile. Now I have 2 cards left that I haven't used, and I get to buy a faculty still. You buy 1 student and 1 faculty a turn. I have 3 nightmare points to use, and if I look down at the faculty shelf, 1 costs 5, 1 costs 2, 1 costs 6. Well, it looks like Seth Thugwa is going to be the one I purchase. Interestingly, Seth was only put in this box thanks to all the Kickstarter support we had. So I buy Seth, but instead of taking Seth and putting him in my purchase pile, I give him to the opponent, the next person to take a turn, and I put it in their purchase pile. Now that's going to be the first card they draw next turn. Okay, so I paid my tuition, I've gone shopping, and now it's time to see if I have to deal with any nasty faculty. So I look at the 5 cards that I used to buy things with this turn, and I check to see if I have any faculty. I don't have any faculty, so all the non-faculty, all the students, go to my discard pile, and my turn is over. And that's the first turn of the game. All right, now we're on the turn 2. It's my opponent's turn, and my opponent is going to look at their turn summary and do what it says. The first thing they do is they draw from their purchase pile first, and then from their deck until they have 5 cards. So as you can see, the first card I drew was that nasty faculty that my opponent bought for me. Then we go to the store shelves, and we stock them up. I told you before, there are 3 spots on the store shelves. First thing that happens is everything slides over until there are no spaces left, except for the one next to the deck. And we flip over the ones off the top of the deck, so that there's 3 again. So one more time, I look at my hand and I decide to buy, I got quite a few student points. So I'm going to use these 4 cards. 1, 2, does that work? 3, 4. Yep, 4 cards. And I'm going to buy, Billy Dyer. Because Billy costs 6, and Billy goes right into my purchase pile. Now it's time to buy a faculty. I only have 1 nightmare point. And the faculty out there all cost substantially more than 1. This is where the substitute teacher comes into play. Every turn you get a student, and every turn you buy a faculty for your opponent. If you can't afford a faculty, 1 will be provided for you, and that is the substitute. So instead of passing and doing nothing, I still get to give my opponent a substitute card in their purchase pile. It's important to remember that every turn you get one or the other. Had I not been able to afford a student, I would have taken a transfer card and put it into my purchase pile. But I could, so that goes back there. All right, so I've done my purchasing, and now we go and we look at our cards and see if we have any faculty. This phase of the game is called having class. All my non-faculty cards go right to my discard pile, and it looks like Seth here is going to hold class. So I take Seth, and I put Seth in the classroom. Now Seth is going to try to drain the precious sanity from my house. So what we do for class is very simple. For every faculty that's in there, I'm going to draw one card from the top of the deck. If this is a student, this will be a BFF. All right, I drew Natalie. So Natalie is going to try to defend our house's sanity against Seth. Now it's probably a good time to take a look at some of these cards and tell you what all these icons mean. On Seth, he has an apple, which is his health, and he has a paddle, which is how much sanity he's going to hurt me for. Over here on Natalie, I have a croquet mallet, and that's her girl power. And then I have resolve, which is how tough mentally she is. So the first thing that happens in a class is you count up all the points of girl power you have, and you basically try to squash the apple with the mallet. So I have 1 point of girl power, but it takes 2 points of girl power to squash that apple. So I do not defeat Seth. If I had defeated Seth, Seth would go right to my discard pile and class would be over. So Seth is going to survive, and Seth is going to deal me 1 point of sanity damage. Except it looks like Natalie has enough resolve that she can stop 1 point. So in the end, I'm going to take no sanity damage. This is also a good time to start talking about abilities. Like a lot of games, a lot of the cards in Miskatonic have interesting little abilities. This card, Seth, has an ability that starts with the word survive. That means if Seth survives, if his apple doesn't get squashed by the mallet, that ability is going to happen. This ability says, shuffle all faculty cards in your discard pile into your deck. I don't have any, so that's not really going to have an effect, but that's how those effects work. So since I blocked all the sanity damage with Natalie's resolve, class is over, those go to my discard pile, and that's the end of turn 2. All right, here we are at turn 3. It's back to my turn again, and I'm going to do what I do every turn. I'm going to draw cards from my purchase pile first. There's 2 of them there now, 1 student and 1 faculty. And I'm going to keep drawing from my deck until I have 5 cards. All right, now I'm going to fill the store shelf. There's 1 empty spot here for the students already. Oh, look at that. So I drew another card. This is an interesting kind of student card. It's actually a locker card. It means there's something special in the locker I might get. Now over here we have a full shelf. Whenever you have a full shelf, you slide everything over, and the one on the end falls off. You just discard that over there, and you replace with the top card of your deck. You're always replacing with at least 1 card. Oh, we have another special kind of card. If you notice, this card looks like a calendar on the principal's desk. This is an event card. When this shows up, you do whatever the event says. This says, put this card in your locker. On your turn, you may purchase the top card of the faculty deck for 3 nightmare points instead of buying from the shelf. Put this card into your locker. What does that mean? Well, this area right to the right is called your locker. So this card's going to stay here, and it's a permanent. It's going to stay in play and do whatever it does for the rest of the game. Events have one other function. When an event comes out, the whole store shelf gets cleared. So these 2 cards, they go away too, and we refill all 3 spots. Now it's possible to draw another event, clear those out, and keep going. All right, but for now, looks like there's no more events, and it's time for me to buy. I am going to buy the other locker card for 4 friendship points. This one says, while in play, every other house loses 1 sanity each time you defeat a faculty card. Defeating is when your hammer has enough points to smash the apple. And this is a locker card, so it goes right over here too, which is a pretty cool locker card actually. All right, and I don't have enough to buy a faculty, so my opponent gets one of the substitute teachers instead. All right, now we go to class. I have 4 students, so they get discarded right away. And I have a substitute teacher trying to come in and trying to teach me a thing or two. I draw my BFF to see what happens. And you look at these 2 cards. Natalie has 1 point of girl power, which is enough to squash the substitute's 1 point of basically toughness and damage, whatever you want to call it. And then the substitute is now defeated. So the substitute is defeated, goes right to the discard pile. And because I have this card in my locker, every time I defeat one of my teachers, every other house loses a sanity. So my poor buddy over there, he's got to lose his sanity. Doop. All right. And then I discard the rest of my cards because I'm not taking any damage myself. All right, so that's the 3rd turn. You've seen events and locker cards, how you buy things, and how you lose sanity. So now we're going to jump ahead to a couple of advanced turns and sort of show you some more tricky things that might happen and how special card effects work. What happens when it's your turn? You do what you always do. You draw your cards from your purchase pile and then your cards from your deck until you have 5 in your hand, but your deck runs out. Well, what you do is pretty simple. You basically keep the cards you drew, you go over to your discard pile, grab those cards, you reshuffle them, pretty simple, put it back to your deck spot over here, and then finish drawing until you have 5 cards. This is actually going to happen quite a few times in the game, and what you're going to try to do is make sure that your deck is as favorable to you as it can be. Okay, so it's my turn, and I've already bought my stuff for the turn, and it's time for class. So I look at my hand, and I see I have 2 faculty. Both faculty go to my classroom. All these cards go to my discard pile. Now I'm going to draw my BFFs. You draw 1 BFF for each faculty out there. So I draw 1, I draw 2. Now, when we compare girl power to these apple numbers, we get to add them all up together and divide them any way we want. There's no, this person does this teacher and this kid does this teacher. You get to add them all up. It's very simple. So I have a total of 1 girl power. So I'm going to use my 1 girl power to squash this janitor. So this janitor goes away to no effect. And interestingly, this janitor has a defeat ability, which is going to happen as well. All players will shuffle their discard piles and purchase piles into their decks. And now all I have left to deal with is the coach. The coach is going to deal 2 points of sanity damage to me. But if you look, I have a total of 2 resolve. So I'm going to stop all of that damage. So it's important to remember that when you have, when you're in class and you have more than 1 teacher attacking you, your sanity, and you have more than 1 BFF out here, that you get to pool all of your girl power together, distribute it any way you want, and then use all of your resolve to stop whatever damage is left. All right, let's take one look at one more type of battle thing that might happen in battle. Boop. Okay, so once again, I've done my purchasing, and these are the 5 cards I have in my hand. I take my faculty, the substitute, the art teacher. They go to my classroom, and my students, they all go to my discard pile. And I'm going to draw 1 BFF for each student, just like last time. There's my first one, and here's my second one. Look what I did. I drew another faculty as a BFF. When you do that, this card becomes what's called a pet teacher. And a pet teacher is not going to do me any good for stopping these things from damaging my sanity. But the great part about it is I get to take this card and put it in anybody else's discard pile I want in the game. So I'm just going to take Coach Jeremy, and I'm going to give Coach Jeremy over here. So now I have 1 less faculty in my game, but I also only have Natalie here trying to stop both of these nasty teachers. Natalie has 1 girl power, so Natalie is going to squash the substitute. And then the art teacher is going to deal 4 points of sanity damage, and my resolve is only 1, so I'm going to take 3 points of sanity damage. And then they all go to my discard pile. So if you ever see the word pet teacher on a card, that's what it's talking about. It's talking about a teacher that you draw during class as a BFF. All right, let's take a look at some keywords. All right, a lot of cards have keywords in the game. Most of them don't mean anything. They're just there to be descriptive. Like over here, this just tells you that's an art teacher, and that just tells you this is a janitor. But there are 2 keywords you want to look for, which is right here is one, is aggressive. An aggressive faculty is a little more, well, aggressive when it tries to drain the sanity from your opponents. If I were to purchase T. Kelly Lee here for my opponent, instead of going into my opponent's purchase pile, it would go directly to my opponent's class. And my opponent would draw 1 BFF to try to deal with that card and basically hold a mini class out of order right then. Very bad for my opponent who happened to draw somebody with no girl power and no resolve. So my janitor would have just dealt 4 sanity damage. The counterpart to aggressive is this keyword, friendly. If you buy a friendly student during your turn, instead of that student coming over to your purchase pile, that student goes directly to your classroom. That student will act as an additional BFF if there's a class this turn. So at the end of this turn, I look at my hand and I realize, oh, I got a faculty. Then not only do I get to draw a BFF because I have 1 faculty, I also get to use Francine here. So now there's 3 girl power. They're going to squash that substitute and it's 1 apple with no problem. So you want to be able to look out for friendly and aggressive, especially towards the end of the game. Those keywords can really be the difference between going insane and not going insane. Okay, let's take a look at a couple of interesting card abilities so you can get a handle for how they all work. Now let's talk a little bit about the different kinds of abilities that are on cards. The abilities are great because they can either really save your bacon in a tough spot or kind of mess up your opponent. Important thing when you look at the ability text down here in a card is sort of the first word. First word tells you when the ability happens. Bobby's ability here is a pre-class ability. Pre-class abilities happen when you draw the cards into your hand, and then they happen after purchase, but before you have class. So it's nice when Bobby is one of those 5 cards you draw that you use to purchase. Bobby's ability here is particularly good because you can just play it on an opponent and they lose 2 sanity. You still get the production from Bobby, so I don't think you don't get that too. Next kind of ability you'll see here is Roberta. Roberta has a BFF ability. During class, when you draw from the top of your deck to try to defend against the faculty, those students are called BFFs. That's when this ability would happen. If you had drawn Roberta as part of your 5-card hand at the beginning, this would have no effect. Just as if you would have drawn Bobby here as a BFF, you would not get this effect. You have to have them at the right time. Roberta's ability is pretty fun because you can basically take a faculty you've defeated and give it to an opponent. And there's 2 that you've already sort of seen here. The faculty have survive abilities. Survive abilities happen as long as the faculty isn't defeated in battle, meaning the apple isn't squashed by girl power. If a faculty deals no damage because you blocked it with resolve, survive abilities will still happen. Then here's the other one we showed you before, defeat abilities. If you do manage to squash the faculty's apple with girl power, then the defeat ability would happen. These are usually good for the player. And lastly, there are some abilities that are always on. They're just there and they happen. This one, for instance, says, remove this card from the game at the end of class if it is drawn as a BFF. So if this card is drawn as a BFF, at the end of that turn, you take that card and you remove it completely from the game, meaning it's not in your deck anymore, which is kind of stinky. So that's about it for when abilities happen. What they do, if you just look at the ability, you should be able to figure it out. Let me just give you one more example. Here's another ability that is, doesn't have a survive or defeat or pre-class. It's always on. The math professor here is +2 damage for each card in your locker. So you would just look at your locker, see how many cards you have, and for each one you would add 2 to the sanity damage that the math professor deals. All right, so that's all you need to know to play the Miskatonic School for Girls. If you have any questions, you can probably find us on email somewhere or just drop a note in the Kickstarter page. And I want to thank all the Kickstarter folks who made this possible. And I don't know if you've noticed yet, but all of your names are printed right there on the side of the box as our special thanks to you for helping make this game a reality. We really, really appreciate it. And maybe we'll have some new games coming out for you in the future. But until then, keep playing and keep getting crazy.